Mankind has long loved watching people abandon reason to settle insensible disputes with combat. And after the Paul and Olatunji brothers took their ignorance to the squared circle in 2018, content creators around the world realized that they are short of nothing if not senselessness. But for the myriad e-celebs who have put on the gloves for 2 extra seconds of fame, or even just floated the idea of it for one, few fights have captured my heart's attention like this now confirmed bout. Boogie 2988 versus Wings of Redemption on May 13th. Don't be fooled by my channel's join date. I've wasted part of my life on YouTube since 2006. I remember how massive these two gentlemen once were, especially Boogie. Pun actually not intended. I first discovered Stephen Williams the day he published his gut-plunging video in 2008. I was disgusted, immediately resented him, and left him countless comments impolitely bemoaning that he was blazing a trail for people to become famous by acting stupid. I regret being such a hateful, if not prescient kid. As for Geordie Jordan, I've watched his downfall interminably with shock and gloom. As a kid, I saw him as a down-to-earth, simple guy who was good at Call of Duty World at War. When I first saw the look here, listen meltdown,
Look here! Look, listen!
I had a hard time reconciling the man in the clip with the image of the same person I loosely knew of. I never imagined either of these two would be so hated today. But as an old man now, I only bear sympathy in my heart for these two big boys. They've both completely fumbled the fame, the goodwill, and perhaps most importantly the money that fell into their laps because they were never prepared with the acumen to do otherwise. The terrible financial decisions alone they've made over the years speak for themselves. On Boogie's side, he's infamously burnt his money on cryptocurrency and Magic the Gathering cards. Often forgotten and worse than that, he suffered a divorce with all the emotional and monetary ramifications that come with it. On Wings' side, he immediately showered the first women, and their children, to be receptive to him with money. I have no idea how many trucks he bought and had to get rid of. He's presently married to an unfaithful wife, and he can't even get an Uber job without his trolls getting him fired from it. And all this talk about money is to say nothing about how they drove away their once huge fan bases with terrible and self-destructive behavior. It's one kind of suffering never to find success in your life, but it's a much deeper agony to find it, throw it away by your own volition, and live the rest of your life knowing you will never find it again. If you ask me, these guys could use a break. And I think this boxing match between them that Daniel Keem has set up is perfect. Yes, I know Boogie has had his name tied to boxing others in the past for nothing to come of it, which a lot of you take as proof it won't happen. But I honestly think Boogie wants to do this at least once before he dies. He just hasn't had the right partner. There are few people who can match his level of unfitness and have as much reason and shamelessness to show up. Wings is his equal in both shape and situation, and they're on friendly terms with each other. No, I don't expect either of them to do anything athletically spectacular in the ring, but I think there's a sizable chance they show some heart. Not cardio, but heart. Who wouldn't love to see Boogie trying his best to gun for a finish, or Wings weathering a storm to make it to the final bell? This is a last hurrah for both these gentlemen, one final opportunity to do something special for their few remaining fans and perhaps even win back some positive perception. I fully intend to go in person if it's possible, and to my fellow boxing fans, you know it's more exciting than watching Fury beat Wilder for a 4th time. Come on. As for my prediction on who wins, I actually answered this question in a battle short, which is just as definitive and beyond reproach as Death Battle, so you know how this one goes already, but you know it's a damn good fight. I make this silly video to sincerely wish both Steven and Geordie the best, and speaking of my short, it's also obvious and inarguable that Keemstar must have watched it and was inspired by it. That makes me a matchmaking genius, and a stellar main event deserves a good card of fights around it. Let's build out the rest of the Boogie vs. Wings boxing card with 5 more internet personality fights we need to see. Let's get the obvious out of the way. DarksydePhil versus Low Tier God. Will the real DSP please stand up? I've been watching these two Goombas for combined decades, and I still can't tell them apart. They look exactly the same, sound exactly the same, act exactly the same. They're even roughly the same age. Separated at birth, perhaps? Some have said that one is black and one is white, but I don't see it. The only differentiating factor I can discern is that only one has the necessary testosterone to grow facial hair. Anyway, these two both attain notoriety for being poor sports in video games, particularly Street Fighter. As of 2023, Mr. Burnell is the more benign of the two, but he actually used to be the more aggressive. As a youngin', he was always on the verge of scrapping with his fellow competitors at tournaments. But as a man in his 40s, now cattled by his wife, he just keeps plugging away on YouTube, playing video games in a largely boring and milquetoast fashion. Most of the present hatred for him comes from begging and badgering his fans to donate to him under the pretense of needing it to pay bills, when in actuality he's been proven beyond all doubt to be addicted to a terrible gacha game. As I write this video, Mr. Burnell is still dealing with the fallout of appearing on the Side Scrollers podcast, an interview that went viral for his obvious misdirections throughout it. I'm personally disappointed he didn't open up about his addiction then, and I'm now convinced he's psychologically incapable of doing so. Now on the other hand, Mr. Wilson is eternally an unscrupulous, low IQ internet bully. He's constantly threatening to fight or kill the people he doesn't doesn't like and doing whatever he can to harass them from the comfort of his lonely, low-income apartment, including sending his devotees to swat and harry the family members and friends of his opponents. Of course, that's solely on the internet. In the real world, even when Mr. Wilson is twice someone's size, he's not half as tough. He was recently banned from YouTube for violating their child safety policies, and that was a long time coming. But he's finally back on Twitch after blaming his ban on a content creator half his age who couldn't care less about him. I think this fight should open up the main card, and the rule set should be professional wrestling. They're both big fans of the sport and natural heels. Just make sure there are plenty of metal chairs and no head protection, please. As for my prediction, a battle short by Lieutenant Beelzebub predicts a narrow win for Dale Wilson, but I've got Phil Burnell by late TKO. Yes, Dale is in better physical shape, thanks in no small part to performance-enhancing drugs he's admitted using, but anyone who's fought or even sparred knows that fighting is more of a test mentally than it is a physical one until you're seasoned. There's nothing that changes your world as an amateur in a flash like getting punched in the face. And Mr. Burnell is nothing if not resilient. He outlives everyone and everything. Gout, being framed for having an escort by professional catfishers, rubbing one out live on stream unknowingly, and he just keeps going. It's why we call him unkillable. Mr. Wilson, on the other hand, is someone who can't even bear to hear his own name without breaking down. I could go on forever about how mentally fragile he is, but the man who stole his girlfriend put it better than I ever could.
Emotionally weak. That's like an emotionally weak man. That's who talks like that.
Speak your facts, baby.
This next one is for the ladies. How about Amberlynn Reid versus Chantal Sarault? I consider this a good versus evil matchup. Amberlynn Reid was the first woman I know of to get famous for morbid obesity without the aid of television exposure, like Biggest Loser or Dr. Phil. She's shared countless weight loss journeys, vegan diets, and tales of bad bedroom experiences with the world. And her social media career has unfortunately become as dead as her notorious bedroom. She used to be able to eat Burger King to the tune of 300,000 views. Now she struggles to crack 1/5 of that with the juiciest of clickbait titles. And with Miss Reid's fall, Chantal rose. Chantal basically did everything entertaining that Amberlynn did, and then some. She's a foodie too, obviously, but she'll also document herself third-wheeling for undesirable men that abuse her on stream and then one-upping it by converting to Islam to marry someone who may or may not want to cook and eat her. Some people just can't be single, I tell you. She's a much more dastardly and selfish person than Miss Reid, though. She mistreats everyone in her life, including her animals. Shout out to detractor French Fried Girl, who rescued a cat of hers that she was going to put down out of laziness despite being relatively healthy. The cat was so neglected that all of its nails were growing into its paws. Nothing I hate more than animal abuse. And as a cherry on top of the sundae, she's Canadian. Anyway, this is the woman who took everything Amberlynn worked for, and this is Miss Reid's opportunity to take it back. I think this is the perfect headliner for the prelims, because you never know whether ladies will give you the best fight in the world or the worst. The rule set has to be boxing, because without cumbersome gloves, this one quickly devolves into hair pulling. My prediction, I really want Reid to knock her out, but I think Chantal wins by decision. If only because she can't feel pain anymore after all the cocaine. Next up, Ethan Ralph versus Ethan Klein. Here we have two darlings of streaming politics on YouTube. Ethan Ralph is a proud owner of the completely dead
Killstream, baby!
5-Star Days. When Mr. Ralph's not busy causing delays for international flights, revenge pointing the mother of his child, or calling his current wife a whore on Twitter, he can usually be found drunkenly embarrassing himself on Cozy.tv to an artificially inflated viewer count, and to the inflated ego of professional grifter Nick Fuentes. Mr. Klein is a book you can judge by its cover. Boasting a proud porn addiction and simplistic worldviews, the owner of the once beloved H3H3 Productions now primarily defecates content out via the H3 podcast. Despite currently being just as insane as Ralph was when Ralph got banned from YouTube, Mr. Klein remains a fixture on the platform, presumably because his insanity politically aligns better with Google's. This is a battle of similarly named men, both slaves to their baser instincts, both built like infants, representing opposite ends of political stupidity. The format should be mixed martial arts because that's what Ralph constantly says he wants to fight someone in. As for my prediction, I know I should feel bad about suggesting Ethan Ralph fight anyone considering he's lost every physical altercation he's ever had, but whereas Ethan Ralph can't fight, Ethan Klein can't do anything physical at all. The man appears to get winded from using a mouse and keyboard. Just like Boogie vs. Wings, we already have a definitive battle short, so you know with 100% certainty the Ralpha male wins this one with an easy knockout. We'll stick this spoiled fight in the middle of the prelims. Next, I want to see Kentray Brown versus Charlie Zelenoff. This is a personal pick. Outside of both being Californians who do poorly with ladies, these guys have no commonality. But they're easily my two favorite silly internet people of all time. I'd also call it another good versus evil match. Starting with evil, Mr. Zelenoff is the greatest boxer of all time. If you're on this corner of the internet, you probably know all about him already. This mentally ill fellow is a villain most well known for harassing American heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder to all hell, eventually goading him into a sparring match where Zelenoff barely escaped with his life. It's quite satisfying when you recall he's filmed himself attacking random civilians on the street. He and I have actually had plenty of back and forth over the years in DMs, mostly lost with his many social media bans. I'm still willing to give you those footwork lessons, Charlie. Kentray Brown is, or was, the greatest incel of all time. If you weren't there for his legendary videos wherein he would rant about his failures with women like a broken record, you missed out.
The only penis that's going to her vagina is mine! Nobody else's!
The optics of filming so many of them from his car after the Elliot Rodgers shooting attracted quite the crowd, to say the least. I've also had lost discourse with Brown, mostly on his old YouTube comments wherein I offered compassionate advice. No one really knows of his whereabouts now, but he's been completely off social media for years and even briefly had a girlfriend whom he kissed. That's a far better ending than anyone envisioned for Kent, and I genuinely hope for the best for him. I'd make this the co-main event solely out of personal bias, and the format should be shoot boxing because Charlie won't accept that the rule set doesn't have boxing in its title, and there needs to be a little bit of grappling involved to give Kent a chance. See, you might think this is a mismatch in favor of the GOAT, but Kentray has some experience practicing professional wrestling. I think Kent wins with a sneaky standing Kimura, and I know Charlie claims to win no matter what happens. And completing our list, I think I've saved the worst for last. Null versus Keffals. This is a battle that has been fated for all time. Or at least since last year. Josh Connor Moon, better known as Null, is the owner of Kiwi Farms, which is the largest LGBTQ+ safe space forum in the world. You can gossip about anyone there, including nasty transphobes. He also runs a very successful Mad at the Internet podcast and was even friends with Christian before you knew who Christian was, trying and failing to lead him to the right path. Keffals is a transgender woman who has devoted all of her infinite free time and endless Twitter bot-earned connections to taking down Kiwi Farms because she doesn't want to see the LGBT community have a safe space without her. You know, there's actually a lot of truth to those bad jokes I just told. Anyway, this is another good versus evil match, and your definition of who's which side reflects how deeply you think about it. If you only give it shallow thought, you figure, well, Null runs a website where he lets people say mean things about otherwise hard-protected persons and classes in the West, so he's ontologically evil, to quote the misused by Keffals fanbase. If you give it at least average thought, you recognize that Keffals is the epitome of everything wrong with the Western world. How did she first attain notoriety? She bought it, and bought it. She bought herself countless fake likes for her tweets on Twitter to boost her presence, wherein she would give dim-witted replies to anyone she wanted to grift attention from. Keffals' hatred of Kiwi Farms is actually born from it being the place that most thoroughly documented her targeted grooming of children, such as her Catboy Ranch wherein she made underage boys become her cats and sent them collars, as well as her promulgation of the Do-It-Yourself HRT directory, wherein she and Liz Fong Jones targeted minors to teach them how to chemically castrate themselves for their own perverse pleasures. And for all this, she's universally hailed by all mainstream institutions that matter as a hero. This fight has to open up the prelims because these are the two least athletic people in this video, which is saying a lot. The format should be no-gi jiu-jitsu to ensure these two get really close and really personal. And I think Keffals takes it with a quick choke of some form. Even with no knowledge of submission arts, she's got that special strength. Well, if that card doesn't look like $1 million, I don't know what does. Keem, I am once again asking for your financial assent. Take my advice and make all these matchups. Nothing could go wrong. And if anyone wants to hire me as their personal Sean Shelby, please hit me up on Tumblr or Kiwi Farms. Either one works.